If someone had told me a year ago that my life, my meticulously ordered, predictable life, would be upended by a thunderstorm and the man I silently worked for, I would have laughed. A dry, quiet laugh, the kind I reserve for myself in the sterile silence of my apartment. Because my life was a fortress built of routine. Wake at 6:30. Black coffee. 2 pieces of toast. No butter. The 40-minute commute on the same train, standing in the same car. 8, sometimes 10, sometimes 12 hours spent hunched over drafting tables and computer screens, translating grand visions into precise mathematical lines. I was a draftsman, a ghost in the machine of Vance and Sterling architecture. And machine's operator, the grand visionary himself, was Julian Vance. To me, he was less a man and more a weather system. He would sweep into the bullpen, and the pressure in the room would change. Phones would ring a little quieter. Keyboards would clack with a little more urgency. He was tall, built with a solidity that seemed at odds with the delicate, glass-and-steel world he created. His suits were always perfect, dark charcoals and deep navies that made his presence feel even more absolute. He had a voice that could cut through the low hum of the office, a deep baritone that commanded attention without ever needing to be raised. And I, of course, was terrified of him. It wasn't a simple fear. It was a complex, tangled thing, a knot of professional awe, social anxiety, and a deeply buried, fiercely denied attraction that felt like a betrayal of my own quiet nature. He was the sun. I was a bit of space debris caught in his orbit, content to observe from a safe, unnoticeable distance. Our interactions were minimal, transactional. Leo, I need the schematics for the Harrison lobby by, for Leo, did you cross-reference the HVAC placements on the penthouse floor? Yes, Mr. Vance. Right away, Mr. Vance, that was the entirety of our universe. A planet and his most distant, silent moon. I built my world around this distance. It was safe. It was manageable. I could admire the harsh planes of his face, the way a stray lock of dark hair would fall across his brow when he was concentrating, the sheer, unapologetic confidence in his posture, all from the safety of my desk. He was a concept, an idea of a man. Not real. Not to me. I never imagined I would see him undone. I never imagined I would be the one to witness it. My routine was my armor. My solitude was my shield. I didn't want connection, I told myself. It was messy. It was unpredictable. It was everything my life was not. I was a liar, of course. My fortress was made of glass, and Julian Vance was the coming storm. The day it all broke began like any other. Gray sky, the smell of rain hanging heavy in the city air. But inside Vance and Sterling, the atmosphere was electric for a different reason. The Nakatomi presentation. It was the biggest project the firm had ever vied for. A skyscraper that would reshape the city's skyline. And the final physical model, the centerpiece of the entire pitch, was due tomorrow morning in Tokyo, which meant it had to be crated and on a plane by midnight. Tonight, panic was a low-grade fever running through the office. Julian was a contained whirlwind, moving from department to department, his presence a low hum of intense pressure. I was on the periphery, as usual, making last-minute adjustments to the lighting schematics. My job was almost done. I was already tasting the freedom of my quiet apartment, a book, the gentle patter of the promised rain against my window. By 6 o'clock, the office was emptying out. The exodus was hurried, people casting nervous glances at the darkening sky. The wind was picking up, rattling the huge plate glass windows of our 40th floor office. I was packing my bag, a familiar sense of relief washing over me. Another day survived. Leo, the voice cut through my thoughts. Julian's voice. He was standing by the entrance to the main design floor, blocking the path to the elevators. My heart did a frantic little trip hammer thing against my ribs. A trap bird. I turned slowly. Mr. Vance, there's a problem with the model. The tension cables for the atrium suspension bridge aren't calibrated. They're sagging. I stared at him. That wasn't my department. The model makers handled the physical construction. I'm sorry to hear that. Chen's team is usually very thorough. Chen's team is on a flight to Chicago, he said, his voice flat. They left an hour ago. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of pure frustration. It was the first crack I'd ever seen in his perfect composure. And you're the only one who understands the stress and load calculations as well as they do. You did the original drawings for that bridge. My blood went cold. Oh no, I need you to stay, he said. It wasn't a question. I need you to fix it. The first fat drop of rain splattered against the window behind him, looking like a tear on the glass. Then another and another. The sky was opening up. The storm. I started, my voice barely a whisper. The transit authority is already announcing service suspensions. I'll pay for your cab. He clipped, his focus already back on the problem. Whatever it takes. This model has to be perfect, Leo. It has to be on that plane. My quiet evening dissolved. My fortress crumbled. There was no saying no to Julian Vance. Okay, I said, my shoulders slumping in defeat. I'll stay. The office became a ghost town. Just me, him, and the miniature city sprawled across a massive table in the center of the main conference room. The wind howled outside, a wild animal trying to get in. The rain was no longer pattering. It was a solid sheet of water lashing against the building. Forced proximity. The two of us suspended 40 floors above a city being swallowed by a tempest. My anxiety was a hive of bees in my stomach. I worked in silence, my hands surprisingly steady as I delved into the delicate heart of the model. It was a beautiful thing, intricate and perfect except for the tiny, almost imperceptible sag in the miniature suspension bridge. My bridge. Julian didn't hover. He retreated to his glass-walled office, the door left ajar. I could feel his gaze on me, though, an intense, focused energy that was as palpable as a physical touch. I tried to ignore it. I focused on the task. The tiny tools, the hair-thin wires, the precise calculations running through my head. This was my world. Lines, angles, stresses, things that made sense. Unlike the man watching me from across the room. After an hour, I needed better light. My desk lamp wasn't cutting it. I went to the supply closet, my footsteps echoing in the cavernous, empty space. As I came back, I allowed my eyes to drift toward his office. He wasn't looking at me. He was staring out the window at the storm. His jacket was off, his tie loosened. The harsh fluorescent lights were off in his office. He was lit only by the glow of his monitor and the frantic, strobing flashes of lightning outside. In that fractured, dramatic light, he looked different, less like a titan of industry and more like a man. Just a man. I could see the tension in his shoulders, the deep line of weariness etched between his brows. He looked lonely. It was a thought so unexpected it stunned me. Julian Vance, the center of every room he entered. Lonely? I saw a small, pale scar just beside his left temple, a tiny imperfection I'd never noticed from my safe distance. It made him seem suddenly, shockingly human. His hands, which I'd only ever seen holding a pen or gesturing decisively in a meeting, were resting on his desk, and I could see the faint calluses on his knuckles. These were not the hands of a man who only pushed papers. He suddenly pushed back from his desk and stood, stretching. The motion was fluid, powerful. His white shirt pulled taut across his chest and back, and for a heart-stopping second, I forgot how to breathe. He wasn't arrogant. He was just solid, present. He took up space in the world in a way I never could. I quickly looked away, my face burning, and hurried back to the model, my heart thumping a guilty, frantic rhythm. Another hour passed. The storm grew worse. The lights flickered once, twice. My stomach clenched. Coffee. His voice was right behind me. I jumped, dropping a tiny pair of tweezers. They clattered onto the floor. Sorry, he said. He bent down at the same time I did. His hand, reaching for the tweezers, brushed against mine. It wasn't a brush. It was a collision, a spark, a sudden, shocking wave of heat that shot up my arm and detonated in my chest. Every nerve ending in my body went on high alert. His skin was warm, calloused, real. I snatched my hand back like I'd been burned. My breath hitched. My mind went completely, terrifyingly blank. He froze, his fingers hovering over the tweezers. He looked up at me, his eyes dark and unreadable in the dim light. The silence stretched, thick and heavy, broken only by the roar of the wind. Leo, he asked, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it. I couldn't speak. I just stared at him, my heart a frantic prisoner in my own chest. This was it, the moment I would be discovered. My pathetic, hidden crush laid bare on the conference room floor. He would be disgusted, or worse, amused. He picked up the tweezers and slowly straightened up, his gaze never leaving my face. He held them out to me. "Here," he said. I took them, my fingers clumsy and numb. Our hands did not touch this time. The absence of contact was as loud as the touch itself had been. "I was asking if you wanted coffee," he repeated, his voice still low. "No, I mean yes. Thank you," I stammered, turning away from him, my whole body humming with a panicked energy. I felt his presence behind me for a moment longer before he moved away toward the kitchenette. I leaned against the table, my legs weak. Just a touch. An accident. It meant nothing. But my hand was still tingling, branded. He came back with 2 mugs. He placed one on the table beside me, careful not to get too close. "Black, right?" I blinked. "How did you know that?" A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. I noticed things. The admission hung in the air between us. He notices me. The thought was both thrilling and terrifying. Before I could process it, the lights flickered again, violently this time. They held for a second, then died. We were plunged into absolute, suffocating darkness. And then the building's emergency generator kicked in with a groan, casting the floor in a dim, eerie, reddish glow from the exit signs. "Damn it," Julian muttered from the darkness. His voice was tight, strained. "It's just the power," I said, my own voice surprisingly calm. The darkness was a strange comfort, a blanket. "The generators are on. We have some light." "I don't like it," he said, and the words were sharp, almost bitten off. In the red gloom, I could just make out his silhouette. He was standing stiffly, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. The confident, unshakable Mr. Vance was gone. In his place was someone who looked cornered. Something clicked in my head, a memory of office gossip I dismissed. Someone had once joked that Julian Vance, who designed 100-story buildings, was afraid of the dark. It seemed impossible, but looking at him now, the power dynamic shifted. In this strange, red-lit world, I was the one who was calm. He was the one who was unmoored. "There are emergency flashlights in the supply closet," I said, my voice steady. "I saw them earlier. I'll go get them." I moved without waiting for an answer, navigating the familiar layout of the office from memory. I found the closet, my hands searching the shelves until they closed around the cool metal of 2 heavy-duty flashlights. When I came back, he hadn't moved. I switched one of the flashlights on. The powerful beam cut through the red haze, and I directed it at the floor, not at his face. "Here," I said, holding out to him. He took it, his hand brushing mine again. This time, neither of us pulled away. The contact was brief, but it was there, a silent acknowledgement. "Thank you," he said, his voice a low rumble. He sounded almost grateful. "We should probably work in your office," I suggested. "It's smaller. It'll feel more secure." He just nodded, his eyes fixed on the circle of light his flashlight cast on the floor. We relocated to his office, the massive room now seeming like a small, safe cave against the raging storm. I brought the delicate bridge component with me. He closed the door, shutting out the vast, dark emptiness of the main floor. The sound of the storm was more muffled in here. It felt like we were the only 2 people left in the world. An intimate setting, a room built for one, now holding 2. The air was thick with unspoken things. I set up my work on his large mahogany desk. He sat in one of the visitors' chairs, not his own powerful throne, watching me. The beams of our flashlights crossed and danced in the small space. "You're good at this," he said quietly, after a while. Calm, my father was an electrician. I found myself saying, the words surprising me. He taught me not to be afraid of a blackout. He said it's just a chance to see things differently, he repeated, his voice musing. He was staring at me, but it felt different now. Not assessing, not judging, something else. Searching. A particularly violent gust of wind slammed against the windows, followed by a deafening crack of thunder that seemed to shake the very foundations of the building. Julian flinched, a sharp, involuntary movement. Then we heard it. A dripping sound, "What's that?" he asked, his head snapping toward the window. "I am my flashlight." Water was seeping in from the top of the window frame, a small but steady trickle running down the glass and pooling on the sill. "The seal must have cracked," I said. "Hell!" Julian swore, getting to his feet. He moved to the window, without thinking, leaning in to get a closer look. As he did, a larger stream of water broke through, cascading down directly onto his head and shoulders. He jumped back, swearing again, but it was too late. His hair was plastered to his forehead, and his expensive white shirt was soaked, clinging to his chest and shoulders, suddenly translucent. He stood there for a moment, dripping, illuminated by the single beam of my flashlight. He looked stunned, defeated. "This night," he muttered, shaking his head. He started fumbling with the buttons of his shirt. "I can't. This is soaked." My mouth went dry. My heart hammered against my ribs. I couldn't look away. He pulled the wet shirt off, his movements jerky and frustrated. He tossed it onto the floor with a wet smack. And then he stood there, bare-chested in the flickering, flashlight-lit darkness of his office, 40 stories above a city drowning in a storm. The controlled, powerful Mr. Vance had been stripped away, literally. All that was left was Julian. The light caught the defined muscles of his chest and arms, the slick sheen of rainwater on his skin. He wasn't perfect like a statue. He was real, the scar by his temple, the faint spray of dark hair on his chest, the raw, undisguised vulnerability in his eyes as he looked at me. He wasn't looking at me with anger or annoyance. He was just looking, and his guard was completely, utterly down. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice raw, "about all of this. Forcing you to stay. This whole mess. It's not your fault the storm hit," I managed to say, my own voice tight. He gave a short, humorless laugh. "Feels like it. Feels like everything is spinning out of my control tonight." He ran a hand over his wet hair, then let it drop to his side. "You know, for years, I've built this whole life around control. Every building, every deal, every interaction. It's all planned. It's all managed." He took a step closer. The beam of my flashlight wavered. "And then there's you," he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. My breath caught in my throat. "Me? You're not in my plans, Leo," he continued, his eyes searching mine in the dark. "You're this quiet, constant presence. You sit at your desk, you do your work perfectly, and you never say a word. And I'm supposed to ignore you. You're an employee. It's inappropriate." He took another step. He was only a few feet away now. I could feel the heat radiating from his skin. "But I can't," he confessed, the words sounding like they were being torn out of him. "I watch you. I notice that you always get black coffee. I notice the way you chew on your pen when you're concentrating. I notice that you have this tiny, almost invisible scar on your chin. I notice that you never, ever look at me, my world tilted on its axis." He saw me. He saw all of it. I thought I was just imagining things. I whispered, the confession tumbling out of me before I could stop it. "I thought I was invisible. You're the least invisible person in this entire building," he said, his voice thick with an emotion I couldn't name. "You're so present in your quiet. You have no idea. It drives me insane." He was right in front of me now. I had to tilt my head back to look up at him. I could smell the rain on his skin, the clean scent of his soap, something that was just him. "I'm not the man you think I am, Leo," he said, his voice cracking with vulnerability. "This confidence, it's armor. Most days, I feel like I'm just waiting for a storm to come and wash it all away." He gestured vaguely at the window, at himself. "Guess I got my wish." The space between us was electric, a humming, vibrating void that begged to be filled. The fear was still there, a cold knot in my stomach, but it was overshadowed by something else. A wild, reckless hope. He lifted a hand, slowly, as if asking for permission. He gently touched my cheek, his thumb tracing the line of my jaw. His skin was warm, his touch hesitant, questioning. I didn't flinch. I didn't pull away. I leaned into his touch, my eyes fluttering shut. A soft, shaky breath escaped him. "Leo." And then he was leaning down, and his lips met mine. It wasn't a frantic, passionate kiss. It was slow, tentative, unspeakably gentle. It was a question and a confession and an apology all at once. His lips were soft, warm, tasting faintly of coffee and rain. It was the most honest thing I had ever felt. I brought my hands up to his chest, feeling the solid warmth of his skin under my palms. The steady, heavy beat of his heart. It was beating as fast as mine. He deepened the kiss slightly, a soft groan rumbling in his chest. It wasn't about power or control or taking. It was about finding an anchor in a storm. And somehow, impossibly, I was his anchor, and he was mine. When he finally pulled back, we just stood there, breathing the same air, our foreheads resting against each other. The beams of our flashlights were forgotten, pointing at the floor, creating a small, intimate circle of light for just the two of us. The storm raged on outside, but inside, in the heart of the tempest, everything was finally, terrifyingly still. I don't remember finishing the model. I think I did. I have a vague memory of my hands moving, of Julian holding a light for me, our shoulders brushing, the silence no longer empty but full. I remember waking up with a crick in my neck, slumped in one of his plush visitors' chairs. The sun was streaming through the windows. The storm was over. My first thought was a hazy, warm memory of his lips on mine. My second was a jolt of pure, ice-cold panic. The office was silent, and I was alone. Julian was gone. His desk was neat, his chair pushed in. His wet shirt was gone from the floor. The only evidence that last night had happened at all was the finished model sitting perfectly on the conference table and the two empty coffee mugs next to it. A note was propped against my mug, for words in his sharp, decisive handwriting. The model is perfect. Thanks. Not about last night. Not, we need to talk, not. I felt it too, thanks. The word was a slap in the face. It was a dismissal, a clean, professional severance. My stomach filled with stones. It was a mistake, a trick of the light and the storm. A moment of weakness for him, a moment of catastrophic hope for me. He was back to being Mr. Vance, the man of control, and I was back to being Leo, the draftsman, the ghost. I felt sick. Humiliation washed over me, hot and shameful. How could I have been so stupid? To believe that a kiss in the dark could change the fundamental laws of our universe? I grabbed my bag and fled the office, not even bothering to go to my own desk. I couldn't bear it. I couldn't bear the thought of seeing him, of having to pretend that my world hadn't just been built up and torn down in the space of a few hours. The city was washed clean, glistening in the morning sun. It felt like a mockery. That was a Friday. The weekend was a special kind of hell. I paced my small apartment, a cage of my own making. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart leaped into my throat, only to plummet when it was just a news alert or a spam email. He didn't call. He didn't text. The silence was a physical presence in the room. It was heavier than any sound. It was the sound of his absence, the sound of my foolishness. My solitude, once a comfort, was now a punishment. The quiet of my apartment no longer felt peaceful. It felt empty. It was tainted by the memory of him, by the ghost of a connection I had allowed myself to feel. I replayed the night over and over. The feel of his hand brushing mine, the vulnerability in his eyes, the taste of his kiss. Was it all in my head? Did I invent the intimacy, the gentleness? No, it was real. His heart had been pounding just as hard as mine. I was sure of it. So why was he silent? The answer was obvious, wasn't it? Regret. He woke up in the cold light of day and regretted his lapse in judgment. He was my boss. It was a line that should never have been crossed. He was probably trying to figure out how to fire me without a lawsuit. The anxiety was a venom, poisoning every thought. By Sunday night, I had convinced myself I needed to quit before he could fire me. It was the only way to retain a shred of dignity. Monday morning was torture. Walking into the office felt like walking to my own execution. The air was normal. People were chatting, getting coffee. No one knew that my personal apocalypse had occurred in this very space just 2 nights ago. I kept my head down, scurrying to my desk, my shield of invisibility pulled up tight. His office door was closed. It remained closed all morning. The dark wood was a barrier, a statement. Keep out. Nothing happened here. I tried to work, but the lines on my screen blurred. My hand was unsteady. Every time I heard footsteps approaching, I tensed expecting the tap on the shoulder, the summons to human resources. It never came. The silence from his office was louder than the storm had been. It was a deliberate, calculated silence. A wall. I felt myself shrinking, disappearing back into the role I had played for so long. The quiet draftsman, the unnoticed employee. But it didn't fit anymore. The shell was cracked. I knew what it felt like to be seen, and the return to invisibility was unbearable. I left at 5 on the dot, unable to stand a second longer. The commute home was a blur. I let myself into my apartment, and the empty quiet rushed in to greet me. I dropped my keys on the counter, my shoulders slumped in defeat. This was my life now. This hollow ache, this longing for something I had touched for a fleeting moment and then lost. A knock on the door made me jump. I never got visitors. Ever. My heart started a slow, heavy thud. It couldn't be. I crept to the door and looked through the peephole, and my world stopped. It was Julian. He was just standing there in the hallway of my nondescript apartment building, looking completely out of place in his perfectly tailored suit. He wasn't looking at the door. He was looking at his shoes. He looked lost. He raised a hand to knock again, then hesitated, letting it fall back to his side. He looked as nervous as I felt. My hand was trembling as I unlocked the door. I pulled it open. He looked up, and his eyes were filled with a mixture of relief and raw, undisguised panic. He looked exhausted, more exhausted than he had during the storm. "Leo," he said, just my name, but it was full of everything the weekend's silence had lacked. I just stared at him, unable to form words. "Can I?" He gestured vaguely inside. "Can I come in?" I stepped back, holding the door open. He walked past me into my small living room, and it felt like the sun had just entered a cave. He seemed too big for the space, too vibrant. He stood in the middle of the room, looking around at my sparse, neat furniture, my carefully ordered books. "I'm sorry," he said, turning to face me, "for the silence, for the note, for all of it. I'm an idiot." The confession hung in the air. "I thought you regretted it," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I thought you were going to fire me." A pained expression crossed his face. "Fire you? God, no. Leo, that's the last thing I would ever want." He took a step closer. I ran. I woke up Friday morning, and the sun was out, and everything was back to normal. I was terrified. Terrified of what? I asked, my voice trembling. "Of you," he said simply. "Of what I felt. What I still feel." He ran a hand through his hair, that same gesture of frustration from the office, but this time it was laced with desperation. My entire life is built on control, on knowing the next step. And with you, I have no idea what I'm doing. That kiss, it wasn't a mistake. It was the realest thing that's happened to me in years. And it scared the hell out of me. The stones in my stomach started to dissolve. The hive of bees quieted. "I spent the whole weekend trying to put the armor back on," he continued, his voice low and earnest. "Trying to convince myself to just leave it alone, to go back to being your boss, to pretend it never happened. But the silence it was wrong. Being in that office today, with that door between us. I couldn't breathe. My own confession rose up, unstoppable. I was going to quit." His eyes widened in alarm. "No, thou, don't." He closed the remaining distance between us, his hands coming up to grip my arms gently, as if to keep me from bolting. "That's why I'm here. I can't go back to how it was. I don't want to." We stood there, in the middle of my living room, the quiet no longer empty, but filled with the terrifying, beautiful truth. "This is new for me," he said, his gaze searching mine. "This feeling, being this off balance. I don't know the rules. Maybe there are no rules," I whispered. A slow smile spread across his face, a real one this time. It transformed him. "Maybe you're right." He reached into his pocket and pulled something out. A single key on a plain silver ring. He pressed it into my palm. "What's this?" I asked, looking down at the cool metal. "It's the key to my apartment," he said, his voice steady. "I went home after the office, and I just stood there, and it felt as empty as it did all weekend. And I realized the only thing that made sense was to come here. To you." He closed my fingers around the key. "I don't want you to ever have to wonder if you're welcome. I don't want there to be any more closed doors between us. It was a promise, a tangible act of commitment. A key." Tears pricked my eyes, not of sadness or fear, but of an overwhelming, bone-deep relief. "Julian," I breathed. "I want to try this," he said, his voice low and intense. "If you'll let me. If you want to." I didn't need words. I surged forward, my arms wrapping around his neck, and kissed him. This time, there was no hesitation. It was a kiss of acceptance, of shared fear and shared hope. He responded instantly, his arms circling my waist, pulling me tight against him, a solid, grounding presence. He was right. There were no rules. We were just two people finding their way out of a storm. The next morning, I woke up not to the harsh, lonely light of my own apartment, but to the soft, gray dawn filtering through the massive windows of Julian's. My first sensation was warmth. The solid weight of his arm draped over my waist. The scent of his skin. The slow, steady rhythm of his breathing next to my ear. There was no morning after anxiety. No panique. Just a deep, quiet sense of rightness. I lay there for a long time, just watching him sleep. In repose, his face was free of the tension and control he wore like a suit of armor. He looked younger, softer. The titan of industry was gone, and in his place was just Julian. He stirred, his eyes fluttering open. He blinked a few times, then a slow, sleepy smile spread across his face when he saw me. "Morning," he murmured, his voice thick with sleep. "Morning," I replied, my heart doing a slow, happy roll in my chest. He tightened his arm around me, pulling me closer until my head was tucked under his chin. "This is better," he said against my hair. "No storms. No deadlines." We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. Later, we made coffee together in his sleek, minimalist kitchen. It felt surprisingly domestic. My sketchbook, which I'd had in my bag, lay open on his marble countertop next to a stack of architectural journals. My lines next to his. It felt symbolic. The professional hierarchy was gone. The distance had vanished. We were just Leo and Julian figuring it out one cup of coffee at a time. That night, we ate takeout sitting on the floor of his living room, surrounded by blueprints for a new museum. He talked about his passion for design, the real reason he pushed so hard. I talked about my love for the quiet precision of my work, for bringing those grand visions to life. We were two halves of a whole, and we'd never even realized it. Sleeping in the same bed was no longer a source of anxiety. It was a comfort. It was the end of a long, lonely road. Looking back now, I see my old life as a black and white photograph. It was safe, it was ordered, but it was colorless. Julian was the disruption. He was the plot twist I never saw coming. He was a force of nature who swept in and dismantled the fortress I had so carefully constructed around my heart. And in the rubble, I found not chaos, but freedom. I found a bravery I never knew I possessed. I found a connection that made the world feel vibrant and real in a way my solitude never could. He didn't just upend my life. He gave me a new one. A life where I wasn't a ghost in the machine, but an equal partner. A life where silence isn't empty, but full of a comfortable, shared peace. He showed me that the biggest risks often lead to the most profound beauty, much like the daring, gravity-defying buildings he designs. My name is Leo, and I didn't come to the firm looking for love. But sometimes love finds you 40 floors up in the middle of a thunderstorm. And sometimes the man you were most afraid of is the one who is waiting to bring you home. It makes me wonder, have you ever had a moment that completely changed the course of your life? A single event or a person that shattered your routine and showed you who you were truly meant to be? Let me know your story in the comments below. I'd love to read about the storms that changed you. And if you enjoy stories about finding love in unexpected places, please consider subscribing for more.